So last session we kicked off Ecclesiastes and looked at the whole concept that life is Hebel. Life is not so much vain, like Ecclesiastes starts with this motto, vanity, vanity, all is vanity, or meaningless, meaningless, all is meaningless. And I suggested from the Hebrew that the word is Hebel. It's not vain, it's not meaningless. Its life is like smoke. It just dissipates. It just disappears. Life is the briefest of breaths, just breath. And it was highlighting just how fragile and how uncontrollable our lives actually are. We like to think we have control of them and we have powerful decision making and we're not vulnerable to the world. But the writer of Ecclesiastes is asserting we're absolutely passe. And that's really a hard concept for us who've grown up with a high level of sense of control and autonomy to actually face. And he goes on to say that our lives are merely shepherding the wind. So the things we do are merely trying to shepherd breath, shepherd wind, or ruach is the Hebrew word. So we can think we can manage it, we can think we can control it, but actually, ultimately, you can't put wind in a paddock, you can't shepherd it, nor can we achieve the goals or the ends that we so deeply desire in life. So the writer of Hebrews is very much of Ecclesiastes, is very much posturing ourselves that we are not powerful like we would like to be. We are not ones who can achieve anything we want to achieve. And he's going to develop that over this chapter. So I want to read the rest of the Ecclesiastes 1 over this talk, but I'll read from verse 4 to 11, which concludes the introduction, and then he begins to direct us in terms of his journey about how he sought to control and shape life. And he says, a generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hurries to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes around to the north. Round and round the wind goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they continue to flow. All things are wearisome, more than one can express. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, or the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. There is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, see, this is new? It has already been in the ages before us. The people of long ago are not remembered, nor will there be any remembrance of people yet to come by those who come after them. So Lord, speak to us through your word. May it be light and life to us, even in a subversive way, we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. Derek Kidness says this in his commentary on Ecclesiastes: if one fate comes to all, it robs every person of their dignity and every project of its point. So what he's saying is, if just all of us die and every project ultimately is fatal and won't last, we all lose our dignity and all our goals become pointless. And that's, in one sense, what the writer of Ecclesiastes is hinting at here, that if we live our lives under the sun with no reference to God, no person has dignity and no project has a point. And to prove this, he looks at the endless cycle of life that we see in our planet. And he says a generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. And so what he's doing is paralleling us against the earth or the land. I was struck by this: a generation comes and a generation goes. when I began teaching, and my first school I taught at, actually the only school I taught at, I moved to Palmerston North and taught at a boys' school. And automatically I was in a world of tradition that I'd never experienced in my very lower class co-ed school that I'd grown up in and loved, actually. And this particular day I was walking across the quad and going to my class to teach, and there was a few boys larking about on the other side of the quad, and I just was ignoring it because it's just like what boys did. And a booming voice from one of the veteran teachers on staff called out, "Smith, you're an idiot, just like your father was an idiot before you." And this kid looked totally embarrassed, and I kind of was stunned, A, at how acidic it was, and B, how this person remembered this guy's father who'd been there 30 years earlier, and he was still there. The sadness was that he'd given his life to the school, and he was deeply bitter that his time was ending and he knew he'd be forgotten. And that was the story that people who knew him told me. I didn't know him well enough to hear this story, but his deep anxiety was he'd given his life, his whole life, to the school, and now it was ending. But he'd witnessed generations coming and generations going, and that was what the school was like. Generation after generation would go to the school. People come and people go, and verse 11 highlights that they're not remembered, they disappear. So we might have memory of, say, our grandparents, or even, beyond that if you're fortunate, but very little about them remains. I've got one or two memories of my grandfather and his family, so that's remembered. But people come and people go. If you're a CEO of a corporation, you think, okay, I'm shaping this world. But the person who comes after next after you will restructure it, and everything that you've done will pretty much disappear. That seems to be the art form of the corporate world, restructure the minute the new CEO comes and destroys everything that has gone before. Unfortunately, sometimes churches are the same too. The new leader comes up with a vision and deconstructs everything from the previous leader's time. There is something tragic about this relentless changing of generations, of that memory is lost. So we're not remembered. The place where I served previously, barely remembered. Everything's turned over, and the memory of me is gone. And we can probably look at different places in our lives that generations come and generations go. And the anxiety is, for the writer of Ecclesiastes, that's not only true for them, this will be true for him. And he also will be forgotten. So if there's an anxiety of us being forgotten and wanting to make our mark, the need that we have is to be memorable. I acknowledge I want to do something memorable and not just disappear. I don't know about you, I've always had dreams and thoughts that I would achieve and the things that I would be. And I think a midlife crisis is when you begin to face the fact that all you wanted to achieve and bring and the dreams that you have are unlikely to be fulfilled, and you have to face a new reality that is a lesser reality to what you hope for. But even now, there's this voice within me saying, you're called to be significant. You're meant to make a really big contribution. And I struggle with the fact that I have this, and knowing that my energy and who I am can only decline. I've had an age, I'm on the downhill slide. So my influence will inevitably decrease. And it's tragic to watch people who, as they age, trying to maintain position and power, and crushing people who really desperately need more room to move past them. But our anxiety is that we'll be forgotten, so we hold on too long. We push away the very people who could help build our legacy because we're afraid of not making a lasting impact in the world. We're afraid of not being needed. But the writer of Ecclesiastes puts this anxiety about generations coming and generations going against the backdrop that the earth lasts forever. Now, you might not eschatologically believe that. You might think, no, actually there's going to be new heaven and new earth. But actually, I suspect that means a regenerated, restored, resurrected earth as opposed to something completely different. What we're being told here is that the earth matters and it remains, whereas people don't. We pass through this world and that's the end of the story. In recent times, I've really got into soul music. I never thought I would. I always thought it was a little fairly shallow and all style and no substance. But there is something deeply emotional about soul music that comes through that gospel tradition. And probably the greatest of the soul singers, or at least the granddaddy of them all, is Otis Redding. And I've really grown to love his music. And one of the last songs he recorded was a song called, which is very out of character. It's almost a folk song called Dock of the Bay. And the chorus is sitting in the dock of the bay watching the tide roll away. And there's the sense that he's got nothing to do. And he's reflecting on the fact that he moved from Georgia to Frisco to California. And he says this: looks like nothing's going to change. Everything seems to stay the same. I can't do what 10 people tell me, so I guess I will remain the same. So I'm sitting at the dock of the bay. And he's got the sense that the tide's coming in and out, and he moved to California and he's got a recording career, but nothing's really changed, not really. When I heard it again, I just felt this real melancholy, this sadness that it's actually so brutally true. Whatever we do to rearrange our lives still essentially stay the same. But the tides come and go. And the writer of Ecclesiastes highlights 3 things that stay the same. The first thing is the sun rises and the sun goes down and hurries to the place where it rises. So the sun comes up, the sun comes down, and then it hurries back. That word for hurries literally means gasps or pants, like it rushes to come back up again. So it's the relentlessness of another day, another day, another day. And we're hardwired to this. The sun rises, we get up, we do our thing. It gets dark, start to feel tired, and we start again. So the next rhythm he talks about is the wind comes from the north or from the south, and it cycles around, and then it just keeps coming and going. It's circuit. I grew up in Christchurch. I used to bike all the way to the university, which from Horsville was about 7 miles, and then back again. And you can almost guarantee that it would be a headwind on the way there and a headwind on the way back. The wind in Christchurch always used to turn sometime during the afternoon. And here he's reflecting that the wind comes and the wind goes. And then lastly, the streams go to the sea, but the sea's never full. So there's the cycle of water as well, that actually the water is always heading to the sea, but the sea's never full and the rivers never stop. And these 3 rhythms, if you think about them, they're all rhythms of life. The sun's essential for life. The rivers are essential for life. It's water, the symbol of life. And that Hebrew word for wind is ruach, which is breath. And for Israel, the rains used to come on the wind and water their crops. So these are essential rhythms of life, but they're also markers of things that don't change. They just keep over and over and over again. And this stuff lasts forever. And we pass away. We disappear. We are like the flowers of the field. We just disappear, as Isaiah comments on. So this whole thing that we pass through the land and the land lasts and we don't is very much some of the values that Indigenous people have on land. Māori call themselves the tangata whenua, the people of the land. And there's something of a value that they are there to care for the land. And this is same been highlighted in the fires in Australia, that Aboriginal people have always cared for the land and done limited burn-offs, looking after the forests so that they didn't have the kind of forest fires that occurred in Australia recently, because nobody cares for the land anymore. The land is used and exploited for profit. And this is the theme here that Ecclesiastes has got. We use everything for profit, but actually the land is meant to be cared for. There's been a real misunderstanding of a Christian tradition that we have power over the land because we've been given dominion of it in Genesis 1. But what the true interpretation of that is, I think we've been given responsibility for the land, to use it and nurture it and to respect it. So the first few following verses are highlighting that generations come and go and won't be remembered because they'll pass away, but the land lasts forever. And the land has these rhythms that are lasting rhythms. And then it makes this comment, all things are wearisome, more than one can express. And Proven in his commentary suggests that that word wearisome is probably not a great translation. It says all things are hard at work, just ruthlessly turning over. It's wearisome in the sense that it just keeps going on and on and on. And then he says, but the eye is not satisfied with seeing, and the ear, nor the ear filled with hearing. And so in spite of this, our eyes and our ears still hunger for more. It's amazing how much every sunset can be beautiful, and we can look at a sunset, we'll see a sunrise and enter a new day. I've been going out because I'm stuck here and we're rural, been going out each morning in the cool of the morning and looking for mushrooms because it's that time of year, and it's beautiful and you can't get enough of it. And then you look out on a Ruapehu and you look out on the city from the rise that I can walk to, and it's just like I could look at that view every day. Oh, there's something about being amongst the hills, which is like every day. If you're into the sea, you could go to the sea, and your dream is to have a house looking down on the sea because it's always changing, but it's always there and it's always regenerative, and there's not enough seeing. There's not enough hearing either. One of the things I'm missing is seeing my grandsons, and we got two. And the sound of their voices, of their laughter, we can get it on Skype or Zoom or whatever, but it's just not the same as being there, seeing them, truly seeing them and being with them and hearing the sounds that just float out of them. There's never enough of that. Never enough of the sound of tuis or the flitting of fantails as they fly around you. There's something that's insatiable about being human. We can never get enough of this world. We'll travel anywhere to see beauty, to experience things. And then we'll want to go again. And then we'll want to go again. And this is a hard thing to manage about being human, is this longing for more all the time. But then the writer of Ecclesiastes reflects that there's nothing new under the sun. Under the sun, there is nothing new. So it's the same old thing. Now you'll be thinking, well, there's lots of new things. There's computers and the internet, and we've got a world that's opening up to us. That's all new. But what we actually receive is exactly the same. It's entertainment. It's information. It's relational connection. It's word processing in terms of, like, we don't have a typewriter. Now we have a computer we type out on. It's way more efficient, all that sort of stuff. It's we can access entertainment, we can access so much stuff, but it's still just the stuff that we always accessed. It's more convenient, it's more available. So it means we're more entertained and we're more bored. There's nothing new under the sun. It's true we can access more movies, we can do Netflix. It's just so much better than TV because we can control it, but it's just the same old thing. There is nothing new under the sun. The medium may change, but it doesn't make it new. So human invention is there, but it is meeting the same needs, same longings, same desires. And so there's nothing unique about it. It's just that it proves that we're clever. And so this whole thing of new technology offering us better life, we were promised that it would be so labour saving to have computers and all that sort of stuff. And yet our whole life is still on the treadmill. Nothing has changed. Nothing is new. Even though a new world was promised through all of this, actually it's made us all computer slaves. And work has actually probably less dignity. And so we like to think we're clever, that we can reinvent the world, but it ends up the same. We're just another cottage industry now. Many of us trying to work at home because we've got computers. And cottage industry was just another happening of the 18th century. History just repeats and we forget because we have no memory for it. So we just end up with a new slavery. And Kidner makes his comment in his commentary on Ecclesiastes that life is reduced by its triviality more than its tragedy. Often we can deal with tragedy and we can face it and go through it, even though it be hard and be big and emotionally tumultuous, but we can get through it because we can face it. But he's saying basically the way life is relentless and it's trivial and there's nothing new, that's really hard to deal with. It makes life truly feel meaningless, worthless, and undignified. And this is what the writer of Ecclesiastes is trying to tell us. So the cycles of life are relentless. We want to avoid that. And so one of the challenges that people do, and the fear of being forgotten, fear is that we try to stay young. We keep fit. We will do cosmetic surgery. We'll Botox ourselves. We will do anything to try and feel young and that we're not fading away, that we still have value and worth. But time is relentless and we can't stop it. And so Proverbs says this: the fundamental human problem resides in a lack of harmony between common human aspirations and the very nature of reality itself. Our refusal to accept things as we are. And so we strive, we organise, we fight for our desired results, we fight to stay relevant, to stay chic. It's really embarrassing looking at 70-year-old church leaders pretending to be 25 as they try to lead their mega churches. It seems tragic that we're not coming to peace with who we are, and we are fighting, trying to be something that we are not, because reality is inflexible. The cycles keep on turning. We're always getting older. We're always challenged to stay where we are, or at least avoid the plateau and decline. And rather than enjoy life, God, family, and all the good gifts that are given to us, we're relentlessly trying to achieve. We're relentlessly trying to fight the cycles of life. Now, this sounds a little bit Buddhist, doesn't it? But the Bible is very clear that contentment is part of the core of what it means to live the good human life. Paul says contentment with God, godly contentment is great gain. And the Hebrew concept of shalom, of flourishing, of well-being, I think is very close to this concept of contentment, but the way things ought to be, and that we're not fighting reality. We know how to flow with it, because to fight reality is to shepherd the wind. It's to fight the crookedness of life, that life is not straight, it's crooked. And so to try and do this, to try and control things, to try and get the life he wants. The writer of Ecclesiastes, the teacher, reflects on what it, and pulls the image of the king of Jerusalem. And he's drawing from Solomon, playing on the fact that he was known to be the wisest of people. And I'll just read the next few verses and tie this up. So I, the teacher, when king over Israel in Jerusalem, applied my mind to seek and search out wisdom, all that was done under heaven. It is an unhappy business that God has given human beings to be busy with. I saw all the deeds that are done under the sun, and see all is vanity and chasing after the wind. What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. I said to myself, I've acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me, and my mind has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge, and I applied my mind to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. And I perceive that this also is but a chasing after wind. For in much wisdom is much vexation, and those who increase knowledge increase sorrow. It's so in looking at life under the sun, under heaven, ignoring God, he decides to go on a pursuit of wisdom. If you will, in facing that he cannot control the world, he decides to pursue wisdom to try and construct a life that he wants under the sun. And I think it's fair to say that we have used education to help us construct the life that we want. I grew up, went to school, I was told, I had to get school cert, got school cert, I had to get UE, I had to get high school certificate, I had to get a degree. You really should do postgrad, and I still haven't sorted that one out fully. And for those who really bought the belief that education was the answer, they went on to do PhDs. And I've met so many depressed people trying to complete PhDs or disillusioned because they were promised by academia that this would be open all the doors for them. And here you go, I got the PhD, nothing changed. It's true that some people do get to the top of the education tree, and now they have to prove that they're producing enough publications to justify their existence. If they don't do enough publications, and they're on the treadmill still of proving that they are productive enough to be in the academic system. And now the system changes, and are we getting the outcomes? Are we preparing people for the workforce to be productive? So everything with neoliberal economics is about, are we getting quantifiable results from our education? So educationalists are now business and entrepreneur people now. And you look at how that's happened, that the whole education system is all about achievement and opening doors, and it's become another relentless treadmill. Obviously, there's good things about it. I'm not saying we should ditch it. What I'm saying is, the writer of Ecclesiastes comes to this whole view that, okay, if I pursue knowledge and wisdom and accumulate wisdom, then I will be able to control life and I'll be able to achieve the goals that I want in life. And he sees that this pursuit is another failed project. And just with much wisdom is much vexation. And so this pursuit of and belief in wisdom and knowledge, particularly knowledge, is an aspect of our world. We really do believe that the more we know, if I only knew this, this, and this, then I'd be good to go and I would be a success. And one of the ironies of our pursuit of education and knowledge is that, in spite of being easily the most educated generation of that's ever lived, our social problems are prolific. And if we look at states, and we're the most educated nation in the world, I suspect, can't even solve the problem of guns, can't solve the problem of economic injustice. And if anything, you would argue that the higher education of those who lead has led to setting up systems and laws which are deeply exploitative and benefit themselves. So the higher the education, the more education is used to create injustice and sometimes just downright cruelty. So our fascination with education as a solution to social ills and to delivering the good life might benefit me, but doesn't necessarily benefit all of the community. And actually sometimes that pursuit of success through education and career, which you'll touch next, is actually a violation on our very families. The other thing about information is something that the media offers itself as the provider of all things that we need. Some people trust the online media, some the news. Both, I suspect, are deeply questionable in terms of their selectivity. But whatever you do, our pursuit of more and more information ends up a pretty dark pursuit into knowing we can't find out often the very things that we want to, or prove the things that we need to prove. And knowledge is vexing. We can never know enough. And sometimes people think, God's like that, you can't prove to me God, and it'll never be, there isn't information to prove it. But it's not information that proves a relationship or helps us connect with God. At some point, you actually have to start talking to God and open your heart up to God. And the pursuit of knowledge and our belief that knowledge gets us there is mythical, because there's never enough. There's no end to knowledge, and yet knowledge does not necessarily lead to a good life. In fact, it can lead to quite a dark life. If we get saturated in it, it's actually unending. And so the first place that the writer of Ecclesiastes visits is, can we control the natural world and make ourselves memorable by the pursuit of knowledge and wisdom? And he basically says it's a loser pursuit. I just want to end with a reading from James. And James says this in chapter 4, verse 13. He says, "Come now, you who say today or tomorrow we'll go to such and such a town and spend a year there doing business and making money. You do not even know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wishes, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogance, and such boasting is evil." James is playing out of the same kind of thinking, that our life is like a mist. It just disappears, it just goes. And we think we can make a plan, and we can make a plan that will transcend life itself, life under the sun, and we can't do it. And he says we have to learn how to submit to God and say, actually, God, you're sovereign and I'm not. And for a Western educated person, this is very hard, because we really believe that we're sovereign and that we can transcend and we can control. And especially through education, we can know what we need to know. And the writer of Ecclesiastes is saying, no, that's not the way things are. One of the ways that I have changed, and my approach to life has changed, is I used to, I think, live like a modernist in the sense that I used to think, oh, I'm going to do these and I'm going to achieve that. And now I don't try to shoehorn life in the same way, to push it and shove it. And I'm trying to live more rhythmically. And there's a lot of writing going on now in terms of spirituality, in terms of how do we live rhythmically. And so part of that is morning and evening prayer. Part of that is rhythms of reading the word. And these are deeply traditional rhythms which we share with past generations. And I want to suggest that part of the way the modern world has shaped us was that we come from our energy and from our imposing ourselves on life. And I want to suggest that actually buying into a rhythmic approach to life, that creation is rhythmic. When I do the garden, I face there is a rhythm. That in spring, in winter, in early spring, you prepare the soil, you plant, there's a rhythm of life. There's a rhythm to a month, whether it be there's planting cycles in gardening in terms of the month, and there's all sorts of processes that we can't fight that are just part of life. And how about we consider about how to live more rhythmically, how to actually have a flow of life and a pattern to our lives that is sustainable rather than relentless and cruel to our souls. So next session, I'm going to pick up the whole thing of the pursuit of pleasure and career, and that's where he heads in chapter 2. And I guess what I'm trying to say in this session is that it is human arrogance to think that we can fight the rhythms of this world and outlast them and reshape them. I think pretty much the damage to the planet has occurred out of this mindset that we can control, we can organise, and we can shape. And actually, maybe we've just got that very wrong. I'm not saying that means we should be unproductive. What I'm saying is their identity is not meant to be in production. We don't, we live to work, and that shows in our rhythms of life and the way our values. Hopefully in this season where our rhythms are deeply interrupted, our functional rhythms, maybe we could find some deeper rhythms of life that would be way more sustaining. So Lord, we acknowledge our functionality and that we fight the rhythms of life, and we fight to be remembered, and we fight to be productive. And we've used education as a tool to achieve our goals, and help us to find joy in learning, but not treat it as a mere tool to control life and to achieve success. Because such a pursuit is tragic. So Lord, here we are, we acknowledge our need to be remembered and to do the significant, and help us to do that with you rather than without you. Because our life is like grass, it will pass away, and any lasting legacy is by your grace, if you be willing, and we ask that you would show us grace in Jesus' name. Amen. God bless you.